Here's the thing, if you're 50 and healthy today, there's a very good chance that you're going to live to be 100 and or 90 and or over 100. And what we do is we tend to say as we're, quote, getting older, that we start winding back. And I like to say that as we're living longer, we should be winding up.
Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I speak with fascinating people from all over the world, from every walk of life, who will inspire you to live with zest. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, and my mission is to bring you optimism about aging and help you make full use of the new opportunities that only come at this stage of life. To find out more about the podcast, hop on over to zestfulaging.com. And while you're there, sign up for my weekly email newsletter, The Insider, where you will get fun and quirky tidbits about the show and my exploits, including when I went python hunting in Florida and my participation in the National Senior Games. And if you love the podcast, I'd be grateful if you shared it with your friends. Our music is courtesy of Judy Banker, who was a previous guest on the show. Find out more at judybanker.com. And our technical director is Stephen Litweiler.
Hey, Zesties. Hey, check out my brand new YouTube channel. I'm sharing Zestful Aging longevity tips, usually while hiking with my dogs, but I'm also sharing about the upcoming guest, the one that's coming up the Saturday following, and I get to tell you some inside stuff about them and what you're going to enjoy about their interview. So come on over, check it out. It's under Zestful Aging on YouTube, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Get ready for a great conversation. Today we're going to speak with Michael Clinton, the former president and publishing director at Hearst Magazines. He's written a new book called Roar, which asks, what are you going to do in the second half of your life? Because now is the time to start thinking about that. Welcome to the show, Michael.
So great to be with you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm very excited to talk to you. We have lots of good stuff to discuss. You were living a big corporate life, enjoying the privileges that come with that. I understand you were getting to see some great sports teams and meet a lot of influencers. But then you started realizing that it wasn't enough and that maybe there was something more for you. Do you remember that, how that happened and describe sort of those moments where you knew you had to move in a different direction?
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, first of all, I had a splendid and wonderful 40-year career as a publisher and an executive. I was the publisher of GQ. I was the executive vice president of Condé Nast. I came over to Hearst. I launched Oprah's Magazine with our team, HGTV, Food Network. It was a very fulfilling and wonderful career. But like many people, I sort of was very full. I had been very satisfied, and I was sort of listening to that little voice in my head that said, it might be time to do something different and do something next. And so I think it's important to listen to that voice that's in your head. And so I started to construct what would be the next phase of my life. So yeah, it was listening to that voice, I think, would be the headline.
And am I remembering correctly? Were you on an airplane going somewhere and there was a sort of a nagging voice?
Well,
what was the experience like? Because I want listeners to know, what it might feel like before you even know it's your inner voice.
Well, first of all, there were many airplanes involved. But
Which airplane?
The nature of it all. But what you're referring to is an epiphany I had when I was about to turn 40 on an airplane that I wrote about in the book Roar, which we can talk about in a second. But I think what what was happening, and the people I interviewed in the book, of which there were about 40 of them, I call them the reimagineers, people who really reconstructed a very different second half of life. A woman who was an English major and a writer and editor who decided to go to medical school at 53, and she tells her story, and many, many others. But I think what I learned from most of them, and myself included, is, it really took them a couple of years to sort of coalesce and crystallize as they were listening to their voice, that they knew they had to start thinking about doing something next. Some of it was work and career, some of it was personal lifestyle. There was a woman who was a big executive traveling the world. She had realized she'd gained 100 pounds, and she knew that she had to spend, she had to get herself healthy and fit. And she tells her story about how she lost that 100 pounds and how she did it and what she did. So it doesn't happen in a weekend or a month or overnight. It is a building block of things that gets you there to set you on that journey. But the key thing is to let it hit your consciousness that you know it's there and you can't ignore it. You know it's there and you have to follow the thread.
Did you get any pushback? I know when we were talking off mic, I spoke with Tracy Schubert Barrett, who was one of the co-founders at HGTV, and she said that she had this strange ambivalence because people were saying, what on earth could you possibly want? I mean, you have everything. And she had a funny pushback from people in her life. Was that also your experience?
I've always been very conscious of the seat that I sat in was a rented seat. And I think one of the things that many people, get caught up in is they start to identify themselves by the seat they sit in. And so I was very, very conscious of building out many, many other aspects of my life so that when the day came, I didn't fall off the cliff in that I was giving up all of the trappings of that incredible seat. And there's a chapter in the book called Life Layering, which we can talk about, which is sort of the action plan as to how one can do that. But the identity of what you do is only one small part of who you are. And I think the focus has to be less on what you do and more on who you are as a person. And that's a big awakening. And fortunately, I had a boss who once upon a time gave me that lesson, which I treasured and carried with me from my early 40s when he said to me, you have to remember that what you are experiencing is about the seat that you're sitting in versus, and that's what people are interested in. They're not interested in anything but that. And I was like, wow, that's very profound. Mm-hmm. And so I spent most of my adult life always reminding myself of that.
You reminded yourself where you came from.
Well, that too. I mean, I have this big fancy job in New York City and very successful and hobnobbing with, you said, the rich and the famous. But, I was really a working class kid from Pittsburgh, the first gen graduate from college, came to New York with no contacts and no network and sort of, found my way. And so, I love to tell the story that, it is possible for us at any point in our lives and at any point at any age to really sort of reboot and find a new path and build on it.
I think, and you were the person to do that. You had characteristics and experiences having to really have some grit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you're young, 22, you kind of show up and say, here I am, and you kind of figure it out. But I think the story of Roar is that you can do that at any age. And I love the people that I interviewed because they were bold and they had vision and they were taking risks and they weren't afraid. And here's the thing, if you're 50 and healthy today, there's a very good chance that you're going to live to be 100, and or 90 and or over 100. And what we do is we tend to say as we're quote, getting older, that we start winding back. And I like to say that as we're living longer, we should be winding up. Because, at 50 or 60, you have another 40 years to live. And, playing golf, I'm using that as a metaphor, is not sustainable. So why not have a whole second career that might be 10 years? Why not go back to school and get a new skill and pivot into a new area that might sustain you for, 10 or 15 years? Why not have, another relationship, romantic relationship? Why not create a different kind of set of goals for yourself? That's a long period of time. I just wrote a piece for Esquire because I'm a contributing writer there. Why 65 is no longer the magic number.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the whole construct of government that built that construct, when 65 was the retirement age, it was constructed when the median age, the life expectancy was 62.
Right.
And, now we're bumping up into 80, but everything was built around 65, you're done and out. Well,
Yep.
Today's 65-year-old who might have another 25 years to live, there's a lot you can accomplish. There's a lot you can do. There's a lot you can be fulfilled around. And so, I think that's really this whole new second half of life. We're going into a major rescript of this because of the sheer amount of numbers of people moving into that space. And the agitated baby boomers, of which I'm one, are always redefining the stages of their life. And they're now redefining the process of what it means to be 60, 70, or 80.
Hi, everyone. Have you listened to my interviews with Dr. Bill Rawls? He's been on the show twice, and after I read his book on cellular health and learned about his high standards for quality control, I was sold. I placed an order for Vital Plan supplements immediately. And I encourage you to learn about his work by hopping over to vitalplan.com. If you enter Zestful15, they will give you 15% off your first order. I'm excited for you to try these products. I think you're going to be very impressed. Now back to the show. You were saying a few minutes ago, why not have a new relationship? Why not go back to school? And I think we know that the why not is because it's frightening. And, when I sit with clients and they say, okay, I'm about to retire, kids are launched, partnership is
Yeah.
And then they say, well, let's talk about what you'd like to try. And they say, well, I don't know those people.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? That's scary. How do you, and you have something to say about courage. I know. How do you address that fear of I'm making myself a new life and I don't always really know what I'm doing. I'm just going to try.
Yeah. Well, first of all, a lot of it is self-imposed ageism, because let's be honest, we live in a culture, and hopefully it's getting broken down and will over time, but we get a lot of signals in the culture through everything, entertainment, words, images, that is this ageist, and as a result we have self-imposed ageism. We say, well, I can't do that because, and that is a barrier that individually we all have to break through in order to say I can do the next thing. And one of the things in the seminars that I do and the talks that I do is I say to people, do this exercise. Put your role as parent, partner, and employee to the side. And, important roles, and roles that probably take up 90% of our time. But when you put them aside, ask the question, who are you? And start with that, and start to construct, can you identify who you are without those roles? And that's sort of foundational in the beginning. ROAR is an acronym, so it's the book is it has some great quizzes and fun games, and it's informational, and it's got 4 elements to it, and one of them, which is around how do you identify, to your point, what you do want to do if you don't know what to do. One thing we talk about in the book is go back to your younger self. What did you dream about, think about, want to do when you were in your late teens, early 20s. And, life takes over. And so all of a sudden, you really wanted to be an anthropologist, but your parents talked you into being an accountant because you would get a job, but you really wanted to be an anthropologist. Okay, so what do you do with that? It's interesting. I just happened to meet a man, which made me think of it. He's 72 and he just got his PhD in anthropology.
That's
so,
totally, yeah.
And so he may not have a 40-year career as an anthropologist, but he's going to be in that space for, in his words, the rest of his life.
And now that he's found his place or his sweet spot,
right,
he's likely to live longer.
Absolutely.
Because the purpose and longevity, right, go hand in hand. I love what you're saying about who are you, and that's a big question for people. And what I like to ask is, what did you do as a kid? And I was a big reader. I drew. I wasn't playing kickball. That just wasn't my job. Well, no surprise that I'm basically doing the exact same thing that I did when I was, 5, 7, 8. And do you find that there's a real consistent thread when we go back and we say, who were you before you knew what you were supposed to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. One of the great stories in the book is a woman who was a sales and marketing executive for her whole business career and, married a couple kids, all two-wage household income coming in. But she wanted to always be a mystery writer, a novelist. And in her mid-50s, she started to take classes and she started to do a Dan Brown master class, and she joined the Mystery Writers Guild of America or something like that. And she went to conventions and she started to write a book, and she wrote a novel. And as she said, she had 170 rejections. But she's a sales executive, so she got determination. And she put the first book aside and she wrote a second book, which got picked up by a publisher. She's now published 6 books. Her name is McGarvey Black. She is a mystery novelist. She is 66 years old now. And she said, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be that self-identified mystery novelist I really wanted to do when I was 20. So I think that reclaiming something, and by the way, it's going to have a different interpretation of what that is when you're 50 or 60. It's not going to be what you thought it would be when you're 20. You're not going to go to the Olympics, but you could compete in masters sports.
I go to the Senior Olympics every
there you go.
And boy, that's a fun vibe with all of the over 50s.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
For sure. That's right. I'm wondering, we're talking about like, can I do it? I want to be a mystery writer. What's that like? I'm wondering, you've done so many really enriching and wonderful things in the second part of your life. Was there anything that was scary for you? Do you remember when you signed up for the marathon in Antarctica thinking, wow, this could be really difficult?
Well, this gets back to your earlier question about that aha moment on the airplane when I was 39 years old and I was flying back from Europe from a business trip. I was the publisher of GQ. I had a great job, great family life, great, everything was great. But I said to myself, you're the most boring human being on the planet because all you do is work. And so I at 40, I have an adventure. One of the things we have to identify in ourselves is what is it that excites us? Mm-hmm. So I have an adventure, gene in me. And at 40, I took a flying lesson and I went to climb Mount Kilimanjaro and I took a race car driving course. And I realized I became a pilot and I ultimately climbed many mountains, but I realized that adventure is part of the definition of who I am. So I created this life layer around adventure, which has been with me now since I was 40. And I've done lots of adventure trips and lots of adventurous things. So by the time I got to signing up to run a marathon in every continent, that was already embedded in who I was as a person. So, running a marathon in Antarctica was like, well, of course I'm going to do that because it's part of my adventure layer.
So, that's who I am.
Yeah, that's who I am. And so my next big adventure, by the way, is I'm going to hike to the Everest Base Camp and run a marathon down. So, it's just all part of the layer that we talk about in the book, this how you build the who are you parts of your life.
And, it's interesting because I talk to clients, and maybe for people who think like you, it feels organic, or it feels like that's who I am. I find that some people are just so stymied, and it's hard for them to even imagine. What would you say to people who are so stuck in their rut that for them to imagine doing anything outside of that just feels like blasphemy or something?
Yeah. No, first of all, it's a head trip first, and then you have to take a baby step. And you can't boil the ocean. You have to decide, what is it? What direction do you want to take? I'll give you an example. Someone who was sort of intrigued with the idea of running, but had never run before. And I suggested to her that she just buy a pair of running shoes and go do a couple laps around the high school track in her neighborhood. And, she did that. And then she met some other people who were doing it. And then one of the other women said she wanted to start running. And she said, well, let me join you. And then, they were running a mile, then they were running 2 miles. And then she sort of got into the groove, and she ended up running her first marathon. And, but it was a baby step. And, her motivation was she wanted to do something to be fit and healthy. She had always liked the idea of running. She had been a runner in high school, but she hadn't done it in 20 years. And so she went back to her younger self to kind of reclaim that. And she found a community of runners in her community. And, it kind of built from there. So, it's baby steps to start moving in a direction. And what happens is it just unveils itself as you keep moving forward, in any particular direction.
I love that, because I think this idea of like, what is your, what are you going to do? Who are you? People just have deer in the headlights.
Right. It's true.
You're freaking me out right now.
I know. I just did a talk to 100 people, and I asked the question, and I saw those deers and those eyes. And right. But the life layering concept is how you get there.
Talk a little bit, if you would, about the media fast. As someone who comes from media, I found this pretty interesting.
You said the media fast?
Fast, yeah, limiting media, the social.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes. I think that one of the questions that I always get from people is, well, I'd like to do something, but I don't have the money and I don't have the time. And, the money part is usually about going back to school, reskilling, learning something new. And the fact of the matter is there's an enormous amount of money out there if one does their homework. Plus, there are lots of free courses. Plus, there are lots of resources like Scholarship Owl that people can get funding to go back to school for a certificate or for a degree or whatever the case may be. So, there's a will, there's a way. The time factor is really an interesting one because, this becomes a self-assessment. We all waste time on things that bring no value to our life. And sometimes with the world of our phones, where we're all, checking everything constantly, whether it's, text or news or Instagram or whatever your thing is, if you do a time audit in a given day or a week, it's shocking how much time myself included, we all waste on things that are not necessarily bringing us value. So how do you go on a media fast to say, I'm going to, not tune in to anything on a weekend? Start with the weekend. When I'm out talking to younger people who are in high school and college, and I say, okay, spend a weekend with absolutely no technology, it's like I'm taking their left arm.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
indeed.
Right.
Indeed.
Yeah. And by the way, I would argue that we adults are like that too. But what I would say is spend a weekend with no technology. It's
You feel
amazing.
naked.
You do, but you're
Taking a dog walk without a phone.
I know. So I know.
Like,
Me too. But the bottom,
yeah.
what happens is your brain clears. It clears. If I'm out doing a training run for a race and I'm running 13 miles, there's no phone. And when I'm listening to my own brain, it's amazing what comes to the front of your brain in a 2-hour run. So if you can't do it for a weekend, do it for a day. And what happens is things come to you that come from the back of your brain to the front, and you say, wow, this is something I should be thinking about or doing or pursuing. It really is it's a great process to go through.
It is, and it's humbling as well, I find. I mean, and it's all designed to keep us connected, right? So it's and we're getting some good brain chemistry and all that. So that might be baby steps as well.
Right.
Yeah. So you sound like you're doing a lot in terms of giving talks, sharing, promoting the book. And what's that been like for you?
Well, it was sort of unexpected. When I wrote the book, I had written other books, and this is actually my 11th book, but it's the first book in this subject. My other books were books of photography and some books on travel and so forth. So this was a new space for me. And quite honestly, I wrote the book because I wanted to get it off my chest in terms of the disconnect between what we're told we're supposed to do in the second half versus what many of us want to do, which is to once again wind up and have new experiences. And so the book, which became, a beautiful bestseller, we're in our third printing, spawned these talks and spawned a lot of media. And, we're launching I just launched a business called Roar Forward, which is our website, roarforward.com, which will re-release at the end of March. We have a newsletter, which is a freebie. We are doing membership group for people who are really involved and interested in the longevity space. We're doing a B2B subscription called the Roar Report. So on and on.
Wow.
It's turning into like a thing.
It is.
It's turning into a thing.
It has its own life.
It did, and that wasn't the plan, I have to say. But I was out running and I was listening to my voice, my inner voice, and it was saying this is a good path to take.
And it's different. I mean, it reminds me of, some of the work from, the Harvard study of longevity, which is, like 80 years old now. And they talk about exactly what you're doing, this idea of giving, sharing your wisdom, this idea of generativity, of this is what I've learned, here's what I know, hope it's helpful. It's a different maybe orientation than earlier in your career.
Yeah, I think that's true. And that's definitely a very rich part of it. But I think the other part of it is that we have to stay involved and engaged for our individual selves. So, I just finished a master's degree at Columbia about a year ago. I went back to school in my 60s to get a degree in nonprofit philanthropy. I'm involved in a lot of nonprofit boards. And so I think, lifelong learning is really important for us. We can give our wisdom, but we have to gain wisdom. And being a student is as important as being a teacher. And I think that oftentimes as people move into the second half, they give up the student part. And there's always something new to learn, and there's always something new to experience, and there's always a new place to go, and there's always a new path to take in terms of wellness and health and relationships. And so don't become passive on that side of your life while you're also in the process of giving back and sharing your wisdom and experience.
That's very, very helpful. I know that you're somebody who talks about knowing your numbers in terms of health. And I'm wondering, as someone who is kind of immersed in all this longevity work, have you become healthier as you're doing this kind of, as you've changed your life, as you're doing things according to your roar, I don't know, formula.
Yeah. Well, the O of roar is own your numbers, as you said. And I think that we live in an incredible time where there is so much preventative medicine and tests and so forth, that it's incumbent, if we want to have a healthy life and a long life, it's incumbent that we know our heart rate and our blood pressure and have our colonoscopies and have our, pap smears and have our women having their breast exams and, men having their prostate exams and all that kind of stuff.
All the fun
all
stuff.
the fun stuff. But we live in a wonderful era where we can do all of that, and we can be proactive in our health so that we can do all the things that we want to do. And it's surprising when I ask people who are 50 or 60, pick a number, what's your cholesterol or your blood pressure? And they look at me and they have no clue. And I'm like, that's not acceptable, because, we take it upon ourselves to own our health, because that's the fun. It's a cliche, but it's the fundamental of everything, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And owning your wealth and owning your financial numbers is really important, because if you're going to live to be 90, can you fund a 90-year-old life? Especially with all of the looming crises of Social Security and Medicare discussions that are happening, as on the Hill. So, can you fund a 90-year-old life is a question you have to ask yourself, and do the work. So it's all part of it, owning the numbers.
Yeah. As I'm talking to you and I hear you talking about your life, it sounds like you're so fully alive.
Well, thank you. That's a wonderful comment. And yeah, I think that that is the way I sort of live my life, for sure. I think part of it comes back to the very beginnings, where I came from a family that had nothing. And literally nothing, and across all the definitions of that. But yes, we had love, and we had food, and we had shelter. But I think I've found an enormous amount of gratitude in getting to a place in my life that I have this incredible life. And fortunately, I've been able to lift, my family, and broadly defined, and all the extensions of my family into new and different places, and sharing experiences and taking them places and funding educations and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm very grateful. And I think when you have gratitude, you have to stop every day and be able to say thank you, and to be constantly grateful with the world around you.
And this is just my thought, seeing people in my practice who have had very privileged lives, even though I'm sure it was challenging growing up, that really laid the foundation to make you who you are, and to build in that gratitude. Because when you have it from day one, you can talk about gratitude, but I don't think it's the same.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. I think that there are so many things for all of us to be grateful for every single day in our lives, if we stop and we think about it. And, I certainly know people who are sort of miserable in their own selves, and I step back and I look at them and I say, wait a minute, you're healthy, you have a good job, have all the, why can't you sort of accept that you've got many very good things happening in your life, when there are many, many people who are around us who are disadvantaged in so many ways?
Yes.
But, that becomes such a deep discussion with someone who needs to break through their own barriers on that. Mm-hmm. You know that all too well.
Well, it's interesting. I am, the town I'm living in now is near a very affluent high school that's always ranked nationally. They are having a spate of suicides. We just don't know what to do. And it makes me wonder, about when you're given everything, what is there to strive for? What's the meaning? What's the point?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's certainly the mental health issues that we're experiencing. A lot of it post pandemic,
yes.
for kids and for young adults. And, I'm on the board of the university, and, we were having this very discussion at a recent board meeting with young, freshmen, sophomores in particular, who went through, a really tough period in their post high school years. And, many of them struggling, as they move into those first years of college. And by the way, it's ubiquitous. It's happened with everyone, but I think, kids really, felt it in a big way.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing in session as well. Well, Michael, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Well, what's next for you? What's the next adventure?
Well, the next adventure is this big Everest thing I was talking about. Base camp, not to the top. I'm not that crazy. So,
And that's a timing. I suspect you don't go any old time.
no, it's in May of this year, and I have great admiration for people who set out to go to the top. My friend Allison Levine was the first American woman to lead a group of American women to the top of Everest. I just adore her and her great ability and courage and all of that. But I'm happy with the base camp experience, so I'll be happy doing that. And we're going to keep working on Roar. And I think what we know is 10,000 people a day are turning 50, 35% of the population. The first millennials turn 50 in 7 years. This whole 50-plus world is just changing so dramatically in terms of how people are saying, this is how I want to live my life at 60, 70, 80. It's very different than past generations. That's an exciting place to be.
Absolutely. Where can people find out more about Roar and you and all of these initiatives?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking that. So roarforward.com, which we'll relaunch the end of March.
Okay.
And then, I'm on LinkedIn as myself. We have a Roar Facebook page. We have Roar on Instagram. So yeah, you track me down that way.
What a pleasure. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share it with some of your friends. If you think decluttering could help you feel better and you could use a little assistance with that, check out the online course I've developed with professional organizer and designer Carrie Luderin. It's called Too Much Stuff. And Too Much Stuff is different from other courses or articles or guidance you may have used up. We give you clear steps to deal with the clutter and the tools to help you face the overwhelming feelings and the emotions that come up when we're going through our clutter. And a lot of those emotions are just feeling anxious or guilty or just basically flooded with a lot of different confusing feelings. The course is really practical. It's realistic. The lessons are short and punchy, and they're really manageable. We're not trying to set you up for some long exploratory, super in-depth, burdensome experience. We want something really helpful for you right now. We all need help with our anxiety. So being surrounded by more calm and less chaos can really help. So now's a good time to clear out the clutter so we can focus on what's really important in our lives. So find out more at zestfulaging.com. You'll see more about this under the web courses tab. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email at zestfulaging@gmail.com. Thanks so much. And stay tuned next week for another interview with a fascinating and inspiring guest.